So good evening, everyone, and welcome to this webinar. We have the lovely Kim Clayden back again by popular demand. Kim is a solution-focused psychotherapist and clinical hypnotherapist with a special interest in EDS. So some housekeeping before we start. If you experience any problems with your connection through the webinar or get cut off, just simply come in and join again. I'm here all the time. Any problems, you can send me a chat message. You can do that privately by just choosing hosts and panelists, or you can chat to everyone, make observations, etc. If you want to ask any questions, if we have time at the end, I will try and collate those and put some questions to Kim if we have time. Just pop it into the webinar chat and I will collate it from there. The session is being recorded. The recording is of myself and Kim only, so you're not part of that. And I think that's everything I need to say, really. So thank you for listening to that. Please do enjoy the session. And Kim, it's over to you.
Thank you. Okie dokie. I'm just going to try and share my slides for you, which we managed successfully earlier. Okay. Hopefully you can see those. Yeah, excellente. Right. So hello. Thank you ever so much for joining me today. Just to, first of all, give you a little introduction as to who I am, why I'm sitting here in front of you, giving you information, or why I think I can give you information that you may not have heard before as well. So I've already done a couple of presentations for EDS UK, the lovely EDS UK previously, so you may have seen me about, hopefully. But if not, my name is Kim Clayden, and thank you for introducing me. I am a solution-focused psychotherapist and clinical hypnotherapist. And solution-focused approach is basically short-term goal-focused, evidence-based therapeutic approach. It incorporates positive psychology principles and practices and helps clients to improve by focusing on solutions rather than problems. It's all about problem solving. So it doesn't mean we don't talk about problems, but we're problem solving, how we can manage better, how we can try and stop things from happening again, or should it happen, how can we get that, move forward from that, those kinds of things. So in its most basic sense, the solution focused approach is hope friendly, positive emotion eliciting, they say, future orientated approach. And it can be very motivational for people. It's about achievements and small things that are good, all about helping us move forward from with all the difficulties that we may have. And with the specialization that I do have, in pain management and working with, I'd call myself a wonky body, but wonky body folk. It's all about how we can manage those symptoms better, because I know it's an awful lot that we have going on, and it's how we can manage a new normal potentially as well, because I know for a lot of people, they may have an issue and then all of a sudden they become symptomatic. So not everybody's symptomatic from birth. So, it's managing new normals potentially and working out how we can manage our whole life differently from a life they may have had previously. And that's what happened to me. And I'll go into a bit of that in a bit of detail soon. So it's about pain management, fatigue, stress, symptoms. It's everything that we do. It's the whole shebang, because we know everything affects everything. So hopefully that makes a little bit of sense as to what I do. I work with my clients completely 100% online. I do specialize, as I say, in pain management, long-term health conditions, and I'm personally diagnosed with hypermobile EDS. I have a diagnosis of fibro, ME, POTS, dysphagia, amongst other things. Got a whole bunch of other stuff going on, much like the rest of you, I'm sure. And I'm also known in the hypermobility syndromes community as an expert patient, because I lecture professionals about these conditions as well. I provide presentations to other charities as well, explaining what hypermobility syndromes are. And we go from kind of basic information up to more medical information for everybody as well. So we kind of offer a lot of information and education. I sit kind of like, I would say I'd sit both like on the fence in terms of patient and professional support. I did initially start doing patient support over a decade ago, which makes me feel very old. I did support groups, helpline support for a fellow sister charity, and trained and then hopped over the fence to that professional side. But now I'd say I think you guys have had Jo Southall, the OT, a few times. Like her, you know, we've got that patient and professional experience, and we try and bring that to everybody as well, to offer information and support on both sides. The idea that we can help ourselves manage better, yourself manage better, but also help medical professionals manage us better as well, because we know that's not always the best experience as well. Okay, so I was diagnosed. Oh, and before I do continue, I always forget to tell people, my lovely picture there, you can see I live on a narrowboat and travel the country as well with my husband. So that's why there's always water usually behind me on photos, because I'm on the back of the boat having a photo taken. So I was diagnosed around, I'd say 11 years-ish ago, maybe a bit longer now, with HEDS. My POTS diagnosis actually took a little bit longer because I wasn't so symptomatic at the start of all my EDS stuff. Like a lot of people with hypermobility syndromes, it took a long time for me to get diagnosed. I'm just going to make sure I am, there we go, hang on. I'm just going to go through actually what we're going to do today before I crack on with the whole presentation. I do apologize. I've put my slides slightly wrong. So just a little introduction to me will be next. I'll do that then. We will be going into some definitions of pain. Now, I don't want to teach anybody to suck eggs when it comes to pain and definitions and things like that, but I'm very aware that we will have a wide variety of knowledge here. So we'll start from the very basic and we'll work our way up as well. We'll be going into a little bit on the biopsychosocial model of pain, pretty much because everything affects our pain, affects our brain. So we need to be aware of these things. We're not always aware of just what is affecting our pain and our pain experience. We'll be going into some neuroscience behind anxiety, depression, kind of mental health, and stress, that link with the brain and the body and pain, all of those kinds of things. And we'll have a few little takeaways of things that we can start to do to help manage our pain a little bit better. I don't know if we'll get time for the last few pieces there about central sensitization, relaxation, and some deep breathing exercises. We did that as a second part last time, because there's just so much information and so many things to be able to provide within the time that we have. I want to make sure that I talk nice and gently for you, because I know last time I talked very fast to try and squeeze it all in, and it was hard to try and keep up with me. So I want to take it nice and steady for you all and make sure that you're staying with me and you're getting everything you can out of today. So I hope that's okay for you all as well. Oh, hang on, just going to stop that for a moment. Just let me sort the slides out. Yes, I want that to continue. Oh, actually, we will do that. So from the current slide, there we go. So I would like you to join me before I do actually crack on completely. I do like to do these little Slidos just to kind of get to know who's behind the computers, the smart devices and things like that. Plus I know, you know, being sat that other side of a webinar, what it's like just sitting there watching and listening and taking notes. So I'd like you to just join me if you can. So if you have a smart device that you can use your camera function to scan the QR code to join me, and to fill in when did you become symptomatic? Was it from birth, traumatic event, from an illness, injury, or something else entirely? There is a chat function there available as well. Or if you can't do that, you can join me. I think, oh, actually, I'm not sharing my slide, am I? No, I'm not. There we go. It'd be helpful if you could actually see what I was seeing. There we go. Technology,
I was just about to come in and say your slides have gone.
Yeah, there we go. So we're back. There we go. So the other option you can join me with is on, if you type in a browser, slido.com, and then the number that you get a little pop-up box asking you for a number. Oh, see, you guys are quick. I love it. You can type in a number 1490055, and you can join me on that one. So, and the reason I ask is because my journey is not dissimilar from a lot of people's. Mine was from an accident that I had, that I became very symptomatic. I was always very bendy, but then I had a car accident, and things just seemed to systematically become worse and worse for me. This is very interesting, and we know when. And it's not to poo-poo anyone's experience if they've been symptomatic from birth. However, if you have an illness, injury, or something that then creates this whole world to change, we're also then dealing with a lot of grief potentially as well. I know I certainly did. I was grieving for a life that I'd lost. I know that's a big thing. And I'll go into a little bit of detail as to why. I did do something completely different before this. This is very interesting, actually. And also, it doesn't have to be, I say traumatic event, it can be mentally traumatic, it doesn't have to be a physical traumatic event. Something else, be interesting. Let us know in the chat box what they might be. Okie dokie. I've just lost my mouse. There it is, it's back. Okay. Thank you. Right, so I think we're there. Oh, one more person. Just have a quick swig of my drink. There we go. Thank you. So if you want to screenshot that, you can do to continue to join in. However, I will give you access to those results if you like, because it's always quite interesting to see those as well. Okay. So just that little introduction to me very briefly as I said. So my full-time job before all of this, I was actually an ice skating coach. My job, what I thought was actually keeping me going, was actually kind of breaking me a little bit more and more. The amount of pain when I finished work, or even whilst I was at work on the ice, 8 hours a day, teaching people, not giving myself breaks, that kind of thing. I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. I remember what that pain was like, very, very clearly. Unbelievable amount of pain. I would take my skates off and just bawl my eyes out and then try and drive home, which was very dangerous. And the fatigue was really bad, and because of all of that, I was under so much stress as well, which I didn't recognize as stress, as you do. You just keep cracking on with your job and your world, and you're fine, I'll be fine. So I went to see a couple of different rheumatologists. The first one I saw just said I was hypermobile. Here's a handout, off you go. So I asked for a second opinion because I was not happy with that. I had been Googling, I'd seen multiple charities giving me information about, it was EDS type 3 back then, or hypermobility syndrome, or benign joint hypermobility as it was then known. And the word benign still gripes me today because it certainly isn't benign, as we all know. So yeah, to my rheumatologist's amazement, though, they couldn't believe I was doing such a physical job. They informed me that I needed to rethink my entire career, as it was too extreme of a job for me. And at that moment, my whole world, I think, just crumbled. The skating, the coaching, I'd wanted to do since a dot. I'd always wanted to teach it, and I was going to do it until the end of days. I thought, I'd seen many, many ice skating coaches with new hips, new knees. I knew that would be the life for me, and I was cool with that, but I never thought I'd have to completely stop. My heart absolutely shattered, and I know a lot of people will have potentially been in that same situation as well, having to rethink their whole entire life because of the condition that they have or have been diagnosed with. But I was absolutely in denial for a long, long time, and I kept pushing through and pushing through and pushing through. So, because ice skating I'd done since the age of 9, and being hypermobile or bendy was extremely useful, as you can imagine. I had competed all over the country representing Peterborough, where I'm from. I represented Great Britain over in America. I got 2 golds and a silver, I think, in the Boston, Massachusetts something or other competition, which was kind of cool. There was a whole bunch of us went out there, which was really nice. Before that, I'd done martial arts. I usually forget to tell people because I was always about skating than anything else. But I was actually the youngest female assigned at birth black belt in the country in my particular martial arts. I got my black belt at 9 years old. I'll have to try and find a photo and dig that out sometime because my haircut was phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. It was a good haircut, sort of. So yeah, I was 9 years old when I got my black belt. So as you can imagine, that flexibility was always really good, and with that amount of activity as well, my muscles were really strong. I had an amazing core stability, but always had party tricks. If that does not sound familiar, I'm sure it does. But over the years, I had lots and lots of injuries even before the car accident. Ankle strapped up. Remember having a cortisol injection into my ankle, strapping it, and then going on the ice for a show that I was doing. You know, there was stuff like that happening all the time, and it just didn't seem like other people around me wasn't getting injured to that point that they were having to have physio all the time or cortisol injections, and I was like 14, 15, getting all of these things going on. And I can imagine this is probably ringing up to a lot of people in their ears that there's this little bell going off going, yeah, that sounds like me too. But shoulders being the main issue. After my car accident, I was 19. I tore both rotator cuffs because I held onto the steering wheel and saw them in the rearview mirror coming at me, and smack, both my shoulders went. I had physio, more cortisone injections. Pain just kept increasing, spreading all over my body. Fatigue then started to get really, really like unbearable. If I wasn't working, I was sleeping, constantly in pain. Felt like I was just walking through treacle through my whole entire life. So, and I can imagine that that was the same as well for a lot of people who had those traumatic experiences or injuries as well, or illnesses that created their symptoms to become worse. You know, for one point in my life, if I wasn't working, I was asleep, but I was always in pain, couldn't really function. Doing things like simple housework, I just couldn't do because of pain, fatigue, or both. You know, it's just the way we seem to accept that that's how it is and that's how it's going to be. You get to a point where you're just living in perpetual pain. And no wonder everything just kept getting worse because I just kept pushing through. You know, and how could I give up my job of my dreams that I'd worked so hard for, trained for, sacrificed time with my husband for, you know? But that's what I ended up having to do. Because it was just too much. And I eventually had a complete and utter mental breakdown. I just couldn't cope with the amount of pain and everything that I was in. You know, I saw a GP, I saw GP after GP, specialist after specialist. 2 and 2 always made 7. You know, nobody could put everything together until I got that second opinion from rheumatology, who sent me then on to a geneticist. And even though we know there's no genetic test for HEDS, they ruled out all the other hypermobility syndromes like Marfan's and things, even though I'm very short. They still made sure my arm span was good, and there was no other things going on like OI, you know, osteogenesis imperfecta and all those kind of things as well. Ruled all of them out and then said, you know, hypermobile. EDS for me. And then that's when I could start to kind of put my whole world back together. But to take that long for that diagnosis, as you know, your body all through that point is just systematically falling apart and getting worse and worse. Not only was I putting my body back together, I was putting my brain back together as well, because my brain had just had enough of it all as well. So eventually, you know, finding the right people, the right charities, the right support, you know, like these charities are incredible to help with information and knowledge and all of those things to help us get better, feel better, as well as finding the right professionals to help us as well. So just to kind of give you that, you know, I'm here sat in front of you giving you all this information, but I feel it, I live it, I believe you and everything you're going through, because you know, I've been through it and I go through it too. But also just to add in that I was very lucky. I got to be part, or still am part of Dr. Philip Ball's network as well, which is really lovely. We got the stamp of network event excellence, which was really nice for him before he's retired, but he's still our network lead. So he's still looking after us as professionals, myself and my colleague Joe Southall, the OT, and lots of other lovely people. We specialise in supporting people with hypermobility syndrome, so it's nice to be part of a team when you work as a solo practitioner as well. So let's dive in, shall we? Okie dokie. Oh yes, this was me. I was very well known for a particular move. My back was very flexible, and that's not something that generally gets talked about much when you talk to doctors and professionals and things like that. You can clearly see my knees, elbows, all of that jazz were very, very hypermobile. But the back in particular, I mean, that's not even as far as it would go with that. And I didn't even have to stretch. You know, my back was always very flexible as well. So it's no wonder I struggle with my back as well, like a lot of us. Okay, so we're going to go on to some pain stuff. So that was me. I hope that was okay for you to bear with me on that one. Now, as I say, I don't want to be teaching anybody to suck eggs, but we want to kind of cover all bases and make sure that we're all on the same page with this information. Okay, so we know that pain comes from the brain, regardless of the injury or non-injury related pain. So in order for me to help somebody in pain, we also have to look after the brain. And this does not mean it's all in your head. And yes, I have been told that one as well. Your pain that you experience is absolutely valid. It's a real pain signal, regardless of whether it is considered a useless or a useful pain signal. So we have acute pain, we have primary, and we also have secondary chronic pain. Not many people have heard of that one, secondary chronic pain, which is a fairly new-ish definition in the world of in the medical world, but we'll cover that as well. So acute pain is the type of pain that we have all experienced in some part of our life. Okay, even if anybody who doesn't have a pain condition, they would have experienced this type of pain at some point in their life. Perhaps a broken bone, perhaps tore a ligament, perhaps burnt themselves in the oven, perhaps got an infection. Even infection can cause pain. You and I know that this heals and then eventually does go away, and we carry on with life as normal. They're a temporary nuisance, if you will. So we have a thing, it heals, it goes away. That's how the world should work for us. Okay. So acute pain is just basically, really simply, a warning of harm to the body, either as a result of internal disease processes within the body or damage that's caused by an accident. It's part of our fight-flight response to ensure further harm is minimized. So when you are initially injured, your body will release adrenalines and stress hormones to give you what it needs to get out of immediate danger. So it is to protect you, to tell you something is wrong and something that needs to be done. So there are those people who have a very rare condition where they do not experience pain, and unfortunately they do not have very long lifespans because nothing tells them there's a problem. Now, this was really important for me to understand because my pain is telling me something. Okay, and it's really easy for us when they lived with pain for a long time to just try and ignore it. But your brain is trying to tell you something. So we've got to keep that in mind, that pain is meant to be a helpful experience. Don't shout at me for that one, but it is meant to be telling us of a problem. Okay. Now there are evolutionary reasons for this particular type of pain. I've written that condition at the bottom just in case you are interested. Evolutionary purposes for acute pain. We've got to think about things like pain being a motivator. It promotes recovery by immediate active or passive defense. It helps protect our physical integrity, by making us prioritize actions that help reduce harm, getting away from danger, hiding away from danger. That's what we are built to do. We have pain tell us something's going on. I need to get out of danger. I need to make sure I'm safe and I need to recover. We have this for a reason. Learning and behavior regulation. You think about things like pain providing reinforcement learning, so if you've done something once, you don't want to be doing it again. It's trying to tell us, so don't do that thing again. Your brain learns from pain. It's meant to learn from pain. If certain movements equals pain, we do less of that movement. And we know as people with pain conditions, our brain can very much go into complete self-protection mode and not want us to move at all because any sort of movement equals pain. Okay, so it's to help optimize learning and future behavior, but also it can go above and beyond that, and we start to not want to do anything because we're going into more fight flight too often as well. So we've got to have that really fine balance of being able to move in a way that works for us and also protect our joints and things like that as well. When we think about communication, in mammals, the expression of pain is very visible on one's face, and identifiable by others as well. If I show that I'm in pain on my face, there is that influence of behavior around our social groups and things like that. If you turn it to a support group and you're limping and grimacing, your support group will go, oh gosh, what have you done? Are you okay? That kind of thing. Although we all get it and we all have those kinds of pain, it's nice to be supported by people. It potentially leads to assistance and changes in behavior in our group, our social groups and things like that, friends, family, that kind of thing. We've got to think about all of those things when we think about our pain. Pain related behaviors promote vigilance to threat as well. Thinking again about that fight flight, but it's also there to prevent future harm as well. Again, not to do those same behaviors that create that same problem. And also it can lead to behaviors that help us to conserve energy as well, which is very beneficial for healing. So we have a pain, we try to reduce our energy to, we want to get better and we want to not do it again, but also conserve energy to then heal more efficiently as well. So it's thinking about all those things. It's a lot that why we have that response in the way that we do. And we obviously, we're very good at just ignoring it, as I say. But if we've got acute pain, which we do with EDS and hypermobility syndromes, we have micro macro traumas, we have dislocations, subluxations, we have all of those things going on. How do we prevent that? How do we protect that and stop that? All of those things. Okay, so primary chronic pain, I'm just going to have a quick swiggy of my drink, bear with me. If you see me drink, make sure you drink too. Fluids, good for you. If you can, lots and lots of water. Okay, so primary chronic pain is, we know, more complex of a problem. So although it's defined as a persistent pain that occurs for more than X amount of time, we know we can hit a bit of a grey area with that, with conditions like ours. Okay, so they are defined as having no injury site, and yet they can affect the whole of a client's or patient's life. So primary chronic pain, unlike acute pain, it serves no immediate biological purpose. Okay, as we say, even though it can affect a whole of your life, often it will become part of what is known as the opt-out clause, which is associated with then clinical depression and clinical anxiety as well. So chronic pain and poor mental health absolutely can go hand in hand. They all affect each other very much so. Now, there are reasons for this, why we have primary chronic pain, and not many people know. If you've heard me talk, you probably know, because I talk about it a fair amount, because I think it's important for us to understand where this sort of pain comes from. Okay, because we go through a lot of life having this just background noise of pain and not understanding why we have it. You know, we know there's not always a acute issue, there's not always an injury there, and yet we still have lots of pain. So we think about recuperation. So chronic pain can be associated with late recuperated stages of healing, involving interactions between individuals experiencing pain and potential helpers. Again, it's that if I'm in pain, we elicit those behaviors around us to help look after us. But we did have to worry about things finding us, you know, nice and easy targets. You know, if we think about those cave people days, if they had any sort of injury, and they were limping, for example, they had to worry about wild animals and wild tribes people. So in order for them to make sure that they had fully healed from their acute injury, we then got this primary chronic pain signal happen to make sure they had fully healed. Now, back in those days, we didn't have to worry so much about stress and stress buckets. I'll talk about a bit later. We didn't have to worry about the whole world around us and the world carrying on and going to work and all of the pressures that we have today. So we were just taken to our cave, we were looked after. We eventually healed. That primary chronic pain signal then finished and switched off. Believe it or not, it does happen. And then we could go back out into the world, but we had to make sure we were properly healed and we were back and fully running again before we went back out into the world. Then we think about, again, those visible signs of distress. It influences social groups and people that are looking after us. So if you are in those cave people days and you're still eliciting a pain, you're like, oh, you know, grimace, you'll be looked after more within those social groups. So that's where we developed those sort of signals that we get. And again, you know, it's all about energy conservation, healing, and things like that as well. I think someone's just started sanding next door, so hopefully you can't hear that. My microphone's pretty good. But we do get, it's the sound of summer when the sand has come out and people are doing their boats. Okie dokie. Now, secondary chronic pain. So we know pain can affect everything. Okay, now secondary chronic pain is a pain from a condition that you have long term. So we are thinking, you know, arthritis as an example. It's bone on bone. Unfortunately, even people with arthritis get chucked into the useless pain signal bucket, which is really, really common. And pain clinics are still teaching this. I heard about it very recently from a client of mine. They're still being put into the primary chronic pain bucket when actually a lot of their pain is issues going on mechanically. Okay, so it's mechanical pain. It is things like our subluxations, dislocations, macro traumas from overextending joints. It's all of those things, okay? But it's pain from a condition that you're living with long term. So it can be people that have IBDs and they're you know, Crohn's, colitis, all of those things. So they've got abdo pain. It can be endometriosis. It can be a whole bunch of stuff, but it's conditions that you're living with long term. And as I say, in the kind of grand scheme of things, I think it was 2018 that this finally come about. It's still not really getting into GP surgeries and pain clinics everywhere, and it absolutely needs to be, because we can have both. We have all three, just to kind of, you know, add to it as well. So we have secondary chronic pain. We have a condition that has acute injury, or can have acute injury. So yeah, we kind of tick all the boxes. So when I went to a pain clinic many moons ago, I remember sitting there with my husband, who was my boyfriend at the time, bless him, trying to take notes and doing this pain gate theory and wondering why they're telling me my pain's a useless signal, but actually I've got all of these injuries. I get that maybe not all my pain is injury pain, and maybe there's some useless signal going there, but they were just chucking me in this chronic pain. Just go and do relaxation and you'll be fixed. Well, I don't think that's going to work, but okay, and we tried to have that conversation with them, and they just weren't open to talking about it. So we had to do our own thing and try to learn different ways, like with different charities and things like that as well, like EDS UK and all sorts of things. Finding the right people and the right physios that knew about hypermobility and things like that as well. So hopefully that kind of makes a bit more sense in terms of, if you do go to a pain clinic, yes, you can have primary chronic pain, and absolutely the vast majority of us will, because our brains are so beautifully well wired to pain, because we live with it all the time, that we have secondary chronic pain as well. So hopefully that makes you feel a little bit better, if you've ever been told it's all in your head, and it's a useless pain signal. Yeah, you may have the useless pain signal, but also you can have acute injury. It is a thing. And yeah, it's normal to be like that as well, because we're just not built correctly, and that's okay. We're just a bit different, so we have to manage things a bit differently. Okay, so as we know, pain can affect everything. Pains can affect social life, learning, friendships, work, mental health, which in turn has that physical link too. Relationships, friendships go bad, which of course affects our mental health. Our pain increases as well. So we'll be going on to the biopsychosocial model of pain, which is, I think, being shouted about a little bit more. It's a very old model, but for me it encompasses so much. I think it's important for us to understand just what factors actually can increase our pain experience, and how it all interconnects with stress, the physical, the psychological, the social, all of those things, with that physical factor that we actually experience as well. But just before we do, we have some pain signals. I think I'll just pop all these up now. So there is more in-depth information into this, but I'm just going to chuck this out there for now, just so you get a bit of idea as to some little things that are very useful for managing pain before we move on today. So we, in the neuroscience world, call the different pain signals that we experienced, they're different fibers, so they're neurons that are firing, and these signals are being passed between body and brain and body, to send the signals here, there, and everywhere. They all go into the thalamus. Now, with working with clients, we tend to come up with a whole bunch of things that they're currently using to help manage their pain, and an explanation as to more in depth into what can help manage their pain as well. Now, what we want to look at more than anything is A+ fibers. And A+ fibers are our best friend, because they offer a signal interruption between the body and the brain. And we can only get one of these pain signals to go through at a time. So we want to bombard ourselves with as many A+ fibers as we can. And if you think about what a signal interruption might be, it's TENS machines. That's exactly how they work. They bombard the brain with A+ fibers. Things like putting your heat on. Yes, we know that can have a really nice effect on the inflammatory response. It can help us feel nice and relaxed, but also it can give us lots of A+ fibers as well. That signal interruption. That heat sensation will override the A or the C fiber, in this case, the acute or the primary chronic. I'll be very specific here. Primary chronic is C. Acute and secondary chronic would be A in this case, because acute, even if it's secondary chronic, it's acute pain that we are living with long term. So just to make that nice and clear there. So you think about all those things that could create signal interruption. I get very annoyed with some companies that will say the TENS machine will cure your pain. It will temporarily disrupt the signal. So you want to utilize A plus fibers as much as possible. It's almost putting a lid on our stress bucket, which I'll talk about shortly. So we want to stop all the pain that we are experiencing going in and creating more stress. And A plus fibers are your best friend for doing that. There are other things we can do and other things we need to manage, but just as a little rule of thumb, A plus fibers are wonderful and want to utilize them. So you may like your TENS machine. Not everybody can tolerate a TENS machine. You don't need it on really high, making yourself jiggle or anything like that. But just bumbling away in the background, you know, heat and the TENS machines what got me through all of my studies to get me where I am today. It was just permanently on, buzzing away and heat cuddling whilst I was learning, and that enabled me to do everything I needed to do because I didn't know any more information. I was learning as I was going. Luckily, I found out that a TENS machine was quite useful before I learnt all of this information and went, that's probably why then. Okay, so heat, ice, TENS. Some people like massage, gentle massages. And you think about pattern interruption or signal interruption. If you have an acute injury, so if you catch yourself, or like me, probably got no spatial awareness because we're bendy, walking into door handles and door frames and tripping over your own feet, you know, if you catch yourself on something, the thing that we tend to do first is rub it better. This is why it's creating that pattern, that signal interruption. So we've rubbed the area to make it feel better, but actually we're creating lots of A plus fibers. So that's why things like massage can be really nice. But also massage can create lots of endorphins as well. And endorphins help reduce pain, acute pain in particular, nicely, reduces that pain experience as well. So compression can be really useful as well. So for people who have neuropathy, you know, pain in their legs and things like that, especially at night, because I know what that's like. Compression socks I find very, very useful because having that compression sensation stops my neuropathy being so shouty, and enables me to fall asleep a lot easier and things like that. So it's utilizing a lot of different things and having to think about what creates that signal interruption for you. But in terms of just the speed of them, you know, the malienation and the coatings and things like that is not important for this. It's just a slide I nicked from the course that I teach. So I've created a course to teach more solution focused people all of this stuff so they can understand you guys better, to be able to better help you. But basically, the thicker the coating, the faster those signals are, and it is the A plus that is the fastest out of all of these, so they get there first, and that's why we utilize them as much as we can. Okay, quick squeak before I crack on. I hope everybody's keeping up with me and I'm going at an okay pace. I'm trying to go as gently as I can. I am very aware I talk fast, so breathing, swigging drinks, you'll be with me. Okie dokie. So, biopsychosocial model, as I mentioned, it's very old, I'd say. It's been around a long time, 1977, it says on the slide there. So it's been around a long time. Now, when I was going through my pain experience at my worst, at the beginning of my journey, not everybody likes that word, but that journey of diagnosis and getting better and all of these things, and not fixed, but you know, managing better, definitely. I was told about the biopsychosocial model of pain, but I was told about it in a way that it was just almost, again, telling you that your pain was all in your head, that kind of thing. It wasn't used well. I think it's important for us to understand this, and use it properly, because there's so many things that can exacerbate our pain, exacerbate stress, which exacerbates pain. So we want to be able to manage all of those things because they all have that impact on each other. And it doesn't matter which pain signal it is you've got going on. It can be acute, it can be secondary or primary chronic pain. Your brain doesn't care. Okay, if all of these things are going haywire, it will whack up the pain that we're experiencing. It will turn it up. It's like a thermostat. It just whacks it straight up, and we experience more and more and more pain. And as I say, can be, I don't want to even think about it, pain, just I'm just going to switch my brain off now and just ignore it completely. And that's not a way for us to function. So in terms of biological factors, we're thinking about tissue damage. Okay. So this is all physiological stuff, if I can put my teeth back in, such as tissue damage, inflammation. This is things like nerve sensitization. It's your genetics. I will thank my mum and my nan for all of my bendiness and all my problems, but it is what it is. And I know my genes are definitely interesting, hearing about all the past family history, but all of these things all contribute to our experience of pain. Biological factors also, we have to think about how our body processes sensory input, our perception of the sensory inputs. Some people struggle with, if you've got any sort of neurospiciness, only because I consider myself neurospicy but very undiagnosed ADHD. Any sort of ADHD, on the spectrum of ASD, anything like that, if there's anything like that at all, any sort of neurodiversity, neurodivergence, that kind of stuff, sensory perceptions all play a part as well, because a lot of sound, a lot of light, I've got light sensitivity as well, sensations such as touch, all of those, they're extra sensitized potentially. So instead of it being nice for people, it adds more stress to the stress bucket. It has that opposite effect. So it's things like that as well. It's also how our neurotransmitter activity is in our brain. Everybody's different. Everybody's brain's just slightly different and functioning slightly differently. No two people are the same. It'd be a very boring world if it was, and it's how we're functioning of the nervous system is as well. Everybody's nervous system can be slightly different. I absolutely know I'm more sensitized than my husband in terms of pain. I can have the TENS machine on number 4, my particular TENS machine. I stick it on full blast for him, and he's still thinking, what's your problem? Can you turn it up anymore for his back? Everybody is different. If I was to have it on that, I would be screaming, because I know my brain's wired for pain. It's sensitized that way because I live with pain conditions. I do everything I can to unwire from that as best I can. But if you're living with constant strains of injuries, it's a lot for you to try and keep doing and keep managing. So we just do what we can. But when we think about genetic factors, it plays a role in your susceptibility to pain. Some people may be genetically predisposed to certain pain conditions. Hello, EDS. Hello, hypermobility syndromes. Or may have genetic variations that affect their, pain sensitivity, as we've said. I know my pain sensitivity is more, but it possibly has always been that way. My pain, I consider myself to have a good pain threshold, but I also do feel pain more than the average bear. If I get knocked a little bit too hard, it's like, oh, it hurt. For my husband, it wouldn't. And it's always been that way for me. So I know my brain's wired differently, and in that sense as well. Everybody is different. Neurobiology, what we mean by that is our pain perception involving complex interactions within the nervous system. So we have nociceptors. And nociceptors are very specialist nerve fibers that respond to tissue damage or potential damage. They actually transmit signals to the spinal cord and brain. Okay, so the spinal cord and brain are your central nervous system. everything outside of that is peripheral. Okay, so neurotransmitters such as serotonin, such as dopamine, endorphins, they all play a role in modulating our pain perception. Okay, so again, if there's any sort of ADHD and things like that, we know they lack a lot of dopamine for that frontal focus of work, and dopamine plays a part in, you know, how we move and how much we move. If we have too little dopamine, you know, there are medications to help with bringing dopamine up, but for myself personally, you know, struggling with things like restless legs, you know, they talk about things like dopamine medications. You know, a lot of Parkinson's medications are dopamine based, and things like that. Dopamine plays a role in how we move and how our muscles work with the brain and things as well. But we'll come a little bit more in depth on this later. Let me just check time. Yes, we should have time for all of that as well. So I mentioned very briefly the central nervous system, or the CNS. So the brain and spinal cord process. When we think central, it's just the brain and the spinal cord. And it's how that interprets pain signals as well. So changes in the structure or function of the central nervous system, such as things like alterations in neural pathways. You know, our brain's very plastic, they call it, neuroplasticity, and moving and changing of those neurons. You know, so there's any changes in that, any abnormalities in brain regions, any lesions, you know, anything involved in pain processing, all affects your experience. You know, so it's a lot of things we have to think about that are affecting our pain. And then we have the peripheral nervous system, or the PNS for short, and the peripheral nervous system includes nerves outside the brain and spinal cord, as I mentioned briefly, that transmit sensory information, and that includes pain signals from the body to the central nervous system as well. And there are conditions that affect the peripheral nervous system, you know, such as nerve damage, inflammation. They all contribute to that development of persistent pain as well. Okay, inflammation and immune responses. You know, inflammation is a big one for us, especially with all the injuries, the micro macro traumas that we have, the amount of stress our body is under, let alone the whole world we're trying to manage as well. You know, we have a lot of inflammation running around our bodies. I do remember when I was going through all of my kind of investigations, if you will, I was looked into for arthritis because my inflammation markers were through the roof, and it's because my body was in so much pain and my brain was just having enough of it. You know, constantly in pain, constant injuries. I had a lot of inflammation responses going on in my body. It's not surprising it was through the roof. And they then investigated further to see if there was any arthritis, and luckily for me there wasn't. But the inflammation's still there, and it's still an inflammatory process, an inflammatory response. So inflammatory processes and immune system activation, they all contribute to more pain, okay, through various mechanisms. You know, we can get chronic inflammation. There's autoimmune disorders create inflammation, and conditions involving dysregulation of immune systems, they all may exacerbate those pain symptoms. Okay, things like our endocrine system, hormones play a massive role, and can influence pain sensitivity and perception. And that is for both male and female assigned at birth. It's for everybody. Everybody, you know, hormones fluctuate. Doesn't matter who you are, where you're from, what walk of life you have. Hormones fluctuate, generally speaking, more so for some than others, but we all have a different response. And we may notice more symptoms growing up when we go through puberty, purely because of that change of all of the hormones that we've got going on. So, you know, stress hormones such as cortisol, can modulate pain responses, whilst reproductive hormones like estrogen and testosterone may affect pain perception differently. You know, it's it's everything. Okay. And then musculoskeletal, we're thinking about muscles, bones, joints, connective tissues, you know, all contribute to pain experience, as we all know way too well. So injury, inflammation, degeneration, structural abnormalities in tissues all can result in primary, secondary chronic pain and acute pain as well. And then just very briefly, you know, visceral symptoms. What we mean by visceral is the pain that originates from internal organs, so visceral pain. It's mediated by different neural pathways than somatic pain, and somatic pain is your structural bones, muscles, etc. But dysfunction or disease affecting visceral organs can lead to referred pain, where pain is then perceived in different locations than its source. So if you've ever had your appendix grumbling or your appendix having a problem, and so you get pain where the appendix is, some people could get pain in their back or over the other side. You know, it cannot always be where the organ or where inside we have the issue. We know it can be referred elsewhere. That's all we're saying here. Okay, but it all adds to the response and the stress and all of the things. Okay, so psychological factors. Now I promise you, I'm not saying it's all in your head. I'm not here for this. This is not me. I do not do this. I really want us to have a good understanding of just why we can struggle so much with anxiety, stress, low mood, depression, clinical depression, how this all interlinks together with pain and our bodies. It's important for us to understand. It is really easy for us to struggle with mental health because of the physiological factors. Okay, so we know they are more interlinked than we have ever thought before. It's something I've always believed in. And actually, I did a presentation with Jo, my IT colleague, and she said the worst thing we ever did in medicine was to split, you know, mental health and physical health, and do them, you know, separately, because they just interlink so much and influence each other so much. If we can manage our brain better, our mental health better, we can manage our pain better. But psychological factors often involve things like emotions, our thoughts, our beliefs, our attitudes towards pain, even memories of pain, our coping mechanisms to pain, be it a good or bad coping mechanism. It doesn't matter. Your brain doesn't care. It all influences how our pain is perceived. Sorry, I just got something decide to annoy my eyeball. You know, and it's all about that experience that we have as well. Okay, quick swig of drink. I hope you're still with me. And I'm keeping up at a good pace for you. Okay. Oh, I do have, excuse me, I do have dysphagia. I don't know if you guys know what that is. If you have it, then you will. So I do struggle sometimes taking liquids down. So if I do cough and splutter, just bear with me a minute. I'll get over it and I'll crack on again. The more fatiguey I get, the more that's likely to happen. And sitting up and presenting takes many, many energy spoons. So sometimes as I'm presenting, I get a little bit coughy and spluttery, but I'll get over it. Okay. Factors like anxiety, depression, fear, stress, all exacerbate or alleviate pain perception, all depending on how well we're doing or how not so well we're doing. So we think about cognitive factors. It's the way you think about pain. We interpret pain. Interpreting pain significantly impacts our experience of it. Cognitive things such as beliefs and attitudes, expectations, as I say, coping strategies related to pain. I know mine never used to be very good. They are much, much better now. But I used to just have a bath and go to bed and hope for the best the next day. That wasn't really managing my pain, but that's how I knew to manage it. I was always told to just get on with it and crack on, that kind of thing. So I'm just gonna have to have a little bit of a wriggle. I sometimes just do a wriggle break, but I may have to because my back's getting a bit sore, but we'll see. So examples of all of these things that do affect us in terms of cognitive factors. If we are struggling with low mood, our pain perception absolutely can get worse. Feeling really negative about pain can intensify pain. It's not surprising that we struggle when we are really low in mood, and it just kind of almost feeds into itself as well. It's completely understandable why we feel this way. However, we know things like positive thinking, being solution focused, adapting our lives to a world that, adapting everything around us to help us live the life that we want, utilizing good coping strategies can all help reduce pain. And it's not to tell you to just go and think positive, because I know that doesn't work. There are lots of factors involved and things like that, but we'll give you a few little bits today to help with that as well. Emotional factors, we're thinking about anxiety, we're thinking about low mood, fear, stress, anger, again, all influence pain. I don't know if you've ever seen those experiments where one person does visualization and relaxation when they plunge their hand in cold ice, and one person will just swear constantly. Anger and swearing temporarily can help, but you won't last as long as somebody who is really trying to visualize and be relaxed. Things like that. So it's all about that pain experience and how we handle that. But emotional distress absolutely can amplify our pain. Okay, particularly we're thinking more the primary chronic pain factor. There is a real emotional tie with that as well. Equally, positive emotions, relaxation, emotional resilience, those kinds of things can help alleviate pain and improve how we cope with pain as well. To be emotionally resilient is good. It's a shame that we have to try and be so resilient with everything we've got going on, but the more resilient we are, the better that we can manage pain as well. Okay, but even you think about, we get taught distraction techniques and things. Where our attention is, or distraction is, where we focus that attention absolutely affects the perception of pain as well. Intense concentration on pain sensations can increase our pain perception as well. That's why distraction techniques work so well. Engaging in those pleasurable activities, positive activities, mindfulness, relaxation, all the stuff we get told to do. This is why it works. It does really work. It all can reduce that perceived intensity of pain. It's not going to get rid of it, but we want to turn that pain down. Absolutely. So we're not living with that top end of pain constantly. We want to be able to manage it better. So just think about that for a moment. Why do a lot of us find that our pain's worse at night? And I was terrible for this, not doing anything or utilizing anything. I would just lay there in bed, nothing to distract me at all you can do at that point is focus inwardly on how uncomfortable you are, how much pain you're in, all of those things. And then unfortunately that then just starts to creep up, that pain that we're actually experiencing. And then our sleep becomes more disturbed, or we struggle with insomnia and falling asleep completely, which all adds to the pain. It all makes things worse. So, it happened to me. And if I don't use my tools, my sleep tools, my pain management tools, like my nighttime recording, white noise, heat, or TENS, it can feel like someone's whacked up that thermostat of pain for me too. So I have to use those things to manage my pain as well. Otherwise, I would just be laying there getting more and more frustrated and not being able to sleep as well. Okay. Expectations, placebo effects. I won't go into too much detail, but that expectation of the effectiveness of treatments or interventions can absolutely influence our actual effectiveness. If you go to a good pain clinic that's teaching you all the nice things, and you have really nice people talking to you, you're more likely to have a better pain reduction experience than somebody who's just like, here, try this thing, see you later, or it's all in your head, just ignore it. That's not going to be very helpful. Okay, so it's thinking about all of those things as well. Equally, negative expectations, those nocebo effects can worsen pain. So if we go into an appointment with that negative outlook of we're already negatively forecasting it, it's more likely that our pain will it becomes very powerful, our brain, but our pain can then turn the pain up before we've even gotten there half the time as well. That's just what the brain can do. The brain's amazing, but also amazingly annoying at the same time. And even our personality can affect our pain. So certain personality traits may influence how an individual experiences and copes with pain. You know, if you struggle a lot with anxiety, self-doubt, low mood, low self-esteem, you may be more prone to experiencing more pain. Or those who think more positive, try to be more solution focused, try to do all the things to keep managing and coping with their pain and maintenance and functioning, you know, but we know it can be a better experience, but it can always change. You know, if you do struggle with thoughts, feelings, emotions, and it isn't fixed, our brains can adapt and rewire to think differently, more solution focused, but it takes work and it takes cognitive effort. It takes energy to do that as well. Mustn't ever forget, if we are, you know, trying to manage and think differently, it's all taking energy, and it is precious energy when you've got, you know, fatigue and things like that as well. I absolutely get that. But also social factors, social support, your family dynamics, your cultural norms, socioeconomic factors, all of those things play a part in our pain. You know, if you've got a really positive support network like an EDS UK support, you know, you can have a better experience of pain. If you have you know, a really not so supportive support group, you know, it can make us feel a lot worse and actually increase our pain as well. So feeling supported, be it by people that are close to you, or even you know, in support groups and things like that, has a real impact on our pain experience. It's quite awesome actually, just how much a positive support group can influence your pain and make you feel better as well, just by feeling supported. It's lovely. But also, you know, social stresses as well, any sort of stigma behind pain, you know, the way we're brought up a lot of the time is just to grin and bear it, get on with it. Any sort of lack of understanding from others, family, friends, all may exacerbate our pain. It all can contribute to feelings and isolation and distress as well. Okay, it all has an impact. There's things like, and I don't want to keep going too much into this, but trauma, past experiences all have absolutely an impact on the pain, you know. I had to go through multiple drains in my side for something, and the first experience was not being listened to about the whole by the way, I have EDS, local anesthetic doesn't work particularly well. Oh, you'll be fine. I screamed the place down. It's a horrible experience. Then I've got to go through it again in 6 months' time. Oh, by the way, I've got EDS. And every time I was getting more and more stressed going into it because I was forecasting what was going to happen. So that trauma experience, that past experience of the same procedure, was getting worse and worse as a direct result. So I ended up, then I was doing my training when it all kicked off, and I was then practicing relaxation. I got better at self-advocating, and the last guy who did the procedure was brilliant. He was like, you will remember my name, because he had the same name as the Hulk, Dr. Banner. He was great. And he's like, you'll remember me because I'm gonna treat you well. I hear you with your EDS. See that whole tube of local anesthetic over there? It's all yours. We'll make sure you're comfortable. And it was great. And I made it through, and I didn't scream the place down, funny enough, because I was listened to. But all of that past experience made me unbelievably stressed, which made the pain even worse. So it all has that factor. All right, okay. So, lastly, social. We've touched on it a little bit. I'll fly through this a little bit because I'm very aware of pain. Very aware of pain. I am aware of pain. I'm very aware of time. We've got lots to get through. I'm trying to go at a decent speed, but also there's so much information to offer you, and I want to make sure we give you time for questions because I'm aware the last couple of times we couldn't squeeze too many questions in because I was just trying to like squeeze all the information into your brain. But there's just so much to teach you about brains and pain. And I think it's important for us to really understand all of that and what is involved in our pain, because we just don't get taught this stuff. And for me, it was just so important to be learning all of this because it had such an impact on how I managed and how I thought about the world around me as well. So hopefully it'll do for you too. So social factors, we're thinking not just, socially with people, but environmental. So social environment, culture, our family dynamics, our socioeconomic status, social support, healthcare access, pain perception, and management, all of those things as well. So social factors play a crucial role in the biopsychosocial model. Okay, so it influences how we perceive and experience pain and cope with and manage pain. It's going to take a quick swiggy of water. Oh, do excuse me. So all of these factors, it's just taking a minute. There we go. All of these factors encompass various aspects of social interactions. Sorry, my water's just taking a minute. There it goes. Okay. So thinking about things like support networks, cultural norms, and socioeconomic conditions. So some of the key factors here we're thinking about social support. So the availability, the quality of social support networks, that does include family and friends, peers, healthcare providers. I know it's not always the best, but we're constantly trying to train and teach more about management of these conditions. So hopefully it is going to get better eventually. But it all plays significant impact on our experience of pain. If we do not feel supported in any of these areas, then yeah, absolutely, we know it can increase our pain because it creates stress. Positive social support, as we've mentioned, positive support groups and stuff. A lot of it is around that emotional validation. It's really important to feel validated about how we feel, because we get a lot of the time kind of just swept to the side, it can feel like. Having practical assistance and support, encouragement, even, some days I don't want to go out and try to do a little walk and things because I'm so tired and things, but actually having that encouragement from my husband's like, oh, let's just go get some fresh air, even if you just sit on the back of the boat, because sometimes you're just having a flare up and you just don't feel up for it, but actually just having that encouragement of someone there to get you to do that, you can feel a lot better, and it does make me feel better to go and sit in the sun or just have a bit of fresh air. Having my dog, even when we had her until last year, oh, I miss her so much. She was my little baby. She needed to go outside, so I had to take her outside. That was, for me, that was that encouragement to get moving and things. Pets are a part of that, definitely. But all of these help us cope with pain better, more effectively as well, being around the good people and the good pets too. But on the other hand, we know lack of social support, negative social interactions, all have that contributing factor to increase pain, but feelings of isolation, and as we mentioned, distress and pain-related disability as well. Family dynamics, we know have an impact if we do not feel our family are taking our conditions seriously. We do not feel supported. We can't communicate properly. We don't feel empathy with each other and that kind of thing. They struggle to understand our conditions, so just ignore them. If you don't feel supported, all of that has that impact. So collaboration, with family and support that way can enhance our coping and managing and how we feel as well. And then socioeconomical status, such as our income, our education, all of these things, our access to healthcare, resources, the right people to help us, all of those things have that impact on us as well. And of course, work environment and occupational factors. If you're able to work, it can make us feel really good. If you're not able to work and you do something completely different, you might do some volunteering. You might do, I know some people would love rehabilitating animals in their time when they can, whatever they can do, any sort of occupation. And not forgetting that occupation isn't just about work, it's about who you are and what you do as a person. It's everything. Everything you are and do is an occupation. So if you're crafty and all those kinds of things, that's all part of that. It can all influence our pain as well. So if you're able to do more fun stuff like that and do volunteering or whatever it is that you want to do, even if it's just a tiny little bit, it can make us feel really good. And of course, stigma around things, stigma around pain conditions. Not that we see that when we go to certain appointments and things, unfortunately, it still happens. But particularly we know with invisible conditions such as ours, or poorly understood conditions such as some chronic pain conditions, fibro, migraines, all negatively impact our self-esteem, social interactions, and also the healthcare experience. Those stigmatizations lead to us feeling shame, guilt, distress, feel socially awkward, withdraw, or exacerbates the psychological impact of pain, and then the physical impact of pain and how we experience that as well. And then finally, community support, peer support, as we've said as well, all part of that as well. Okay, so hopefully that all makes sense. Just wanted to make sure we covered all of that, because I skimmed through it a lot last time, because we tried to squeeze so much in, but I think it's important. It just gives you a real idea that so much impacts our stress, and so much stress impacts our pain, and so much impacts our pain, not just stress as well, but they all interlink and entwine and weave around each other so much. Just thinking about one of those factors, yet alone having to juggle all the factors, it's a lot for us. Okay. And it's clear to me as a person with pain just how much, I'll put my teeth back in, stress affects my pain. What going on in my world does and affects my pain, how I think affects my pain. If I'm having a low mood day for whatever reason, it could be cycle related, it could be something's happened to a family member related, it could be absolutely anything. But I know how I think then that day. If I'm having a low mood day, I'm going to have more pain. I lost my dog, as I mentioned, early last year, and my pain went through the roof again. But I knew it was a response to the situation I was in. So I knew it wasn't going to last, and it was a flare-up because it was related to losing Lily. And I knew it would get better. And just knowing that information as to why I flared up, and why I had that response and how much stress I was in, I knew it was going to get better and I could manage it better and things as well. Short term, I know it is all consuming, but to just have that in the back of my mind to know it's a stress response, it will get better, was a real big thing for me to be able to do that. Okay. How are we doing with time? Excellent. Okay. Bit swig a drink. Oh, there we go. So we're going to have a look at the brain. I want to try and give us some time for questions if we can, but this can take a little while, but I would love to give you this information before we finish today. As I said, there's a lot more to all of this, but we want to give you some nice take homes today, just to, I think, be more consciously aware of what affects our pain, because we're so used to just managing everything as best we can. It sits at the back there, and the more we kind of just bring it forward and think about it a little bit more, I think we just manage better and potentially pace a little bit better and things as well. So having a look at the brain. So this part this lumpy part here at the front, that's the part that you know as you. That is your conscious part. That is the part that we use to interact with the world. It's the part that we use to be aware of our interactions together when we're hanging out with each other, even, you know, even if it's online and you can see someone's face, all of those kinds of things. That's that part that is aware of all those interactions together. Okay, luckily for us, it's attached to that upper brain, that intellectual part of the brain, and that's the part of the brain that we do not share with other animals, bless them. But when we work from that area of the brain up there, we generally will get things right in life. It will always come up with answers based on a proper assessment of a situation. Excuse me, and it's generally very positive as well. Sorry, my water's just taken a moment. There we go. Okay, so yes, we think about proper assessments of situations, and we say it's generally very positive as well. And if when I draw the brain for people, I always put a cheesy smiley face in that as well, because we want to be working up here as much as we can, that rational, logical part of the brain as best we possibly can. But then we have that other area of the brain, the part, the original primitive part of the brain, and the center and influential bit of that brain you may well have heard of is the amygdala. We actually have two amygdalae. We have amygdalae. We have two. So we've got a spare, if you will. But this is generally referred to as our fight, flight, freeze, depression area of the brain. It's associated with two other very primitive parts. We've got our hippocampus, which holds all of our primitive and sometimes inappropriate behavioral experiences and patterns. And we have the hypothalamus, which regulates the chemical responses in the body and the mind. So the hypothalamus should tell us when the adrenaline is to go around the body, as an example. But we know with autonomic dysfunction, it can do its own thing as well. The kidneys, where the adrenal glands sit on top, just sometimes decide to go woohoo whenever they like. But it should be the hypothalamus that decides when that adrenaline goes around the body. But it doesn't always work that way if you're potsy like me. Okay, so if we were to walk, wheel, whatever you like outside right now, and you run into that really hungry, snarly polar bear, what would happen? We would lose intellectual control. That primitive brain starts to take over. And more and more, our palms can go sweaty, our heartbeat increases, our stomach can really churn, and we're off like a shot. In this circumstance, this response is entirely appropriate and you would be pleased. But unfortunately, it is the same in life. As our anxiety goes up, and it can be a really gradual process, to a greater or lesser extent, that primitive brain will start to take over more and more and more. And that primitive mind always operates within the primitive parameters of depression, anxiety, or anger, or a combination of all three. Okay, so if our primitive mind thinks that for one reason or another, our life is in some sort of crisis or emergency, it generally steps in and helps, but it will only operate within those three primitive parameters of depression, anxiety, or anger. And they are all primitive opt-out clauses. Okay, and I think it's important for us to understand where they have come from and why we have them, because for me that was one of those moments of light bulb moments of that's why I struggle with anger, quick to anger and things as well. Not just the fact that the pain is linked with those sort of things, but actually it made me understand my emotional response a lot more. But we're thinking about those early humans. If they looked outside and they have their cave and they saw that there was any sort of snow or ice or danger, they wouldn't have gone out and hunted and gathered. They would have gone back into their cave, pulled the rug over their head, stayed by that cozy fire until the situation had changed. We've adapted that same scenario to our modern day symptoms of depression, that low mood, wanting to stay inside, sometimes all day in bed, no motivation to get up and do, no motivation to even be brushing those teeth and doing anything that we want to do or need to do that day. It can be absolutely zero motivation at all. And if we were in the jungle in those days, we wouldn't be too far away from that panic button at any given time. We needed to hit that button to get the adrenaline, the cortisol, to get us out of danger, because anything might, try to be chasing us. And anger is merely that primitive way of increasing our strength to defend ourselves from those wild animals and wild tribesmen. But there is more. The primitive mind is a really negative mind. It will always see things from the worst possible perspective. But if you think about it, it has to for your own self-preservation. So if we run into the hungry polar bear, we don't stand there in front of it whilst it's got snarling and drooling at us, thinking, oh, maybe it's eaten. Quite rightly, you're thinking it's going to snaffle you. And that response is great running into polar bears. Not so good for when bank statements arrived, we're faced with redundancy, we've had an argument, we've got yet another diagnosis or yet another symptom, or we've just popped another joint out, all of those things, okay? It's a really obsessional mind as well, particularly important for any of us that have OCD tendencies. If you did have a polar bear in your back garden, as an example, your brain would be reminding you of it consistently and constantly. You would need to keep checking and checking and checking. It's a really vigilant mind as well. So if the perception is that danger is all around, it's absolutely wise that it stays on red alert. We think about the pandemic as an example. It was looking for a polar bear it couldn't see. Okay, so it was in fight flight. It was in that very vigilant mindset. Our brains were working completely differently. As a result, a lot of brains would have rewired from that neuroplasticity I mentioned, that plasticness to our brain. The limbic system, or that lower brain, that red area where we did earlier, would have got denser because we would have used it more. I know mine did, absolutely. I was told I've got a really dodgy immune system, and then this whole thing's flying around and it's doing horrible things to people. My brain just went, whoa, hang on a minute, and just shut me down. And that's not dissimilar to a lot of people, okay? My brain was in high vigilant protection mode. But also, the primitive brain is not an intellect. It can't be innovative. It has to refer to previous patterns of behavior. So whatever you did yesterday ensured your survival, your brain will encourage you to do it again and again and again. Be it a good coping strategy or a really not so good one, your brain does not care. Okay, it will get you to do it again and again and again. Quick swig. Excuse me. Okie dokie. So how we create this anxiety, which causes us to move from that lovely intellectual sensible part, remember that upper brain, to our more angry, anxious and low mood part. Anxiety is caused by negative thinking, but it's not necessarily the events in one's life that causes a perception of crisis. Because if that was the case, every single person at university could potentially be having panic attacks and pegging it out the building. It's just an example. But we know that's simply not the case. So it must be those thought patterns that surround the events of our lives at the time. Every negative thought we have is converted into anxiety. We can create anxiety by negatively forecasting the future. It can be really big things. I'll never be able to afford that. I'll never be able to do X, Y, and Z. I know for me at one point, it was walking was to a point that I just wasn't able to really do. And I did heart physio, hydrotherapy, all the lot. But for me, it was, am I going to be able to walk again? It was a really, really big one for me. I'd gotten so deconditioned and poorly with the lack of diagnosis. My body had fell apart so much and I was in so much pain. I didn't know if I'd be able to walk properly again. And I know this can be big questions for a lot of people as well. They're huge things that run through our mind. Am I going to be this way forever? Can I manage my pain better? They're all really big questions for us. They all create and convert into anxiety because they are not little things for us. Okay. Now, our brain can struggle with the difference between that real and imagined. So it can also be really small things that we think about as well, like a meeting. And say meetings generally go quite well, but us being us, we start thinking about all the possibilities of how it could go wrong. And we think about them 50 times or more. And say the meeting goes quite well, but you've attended 51 meetings and 50 have been absolute disasters, as an example. So negative thoughts, and let's just pop all of them up there. Okay. Remembering to do my slides, just going to give myself a little pat on the back for that, because sometimes that goes horribly wrong there. So our brain absolutely can negatively forecast the future, and I've mentioned that a few times actually before we've talked about this just now. And it does it with a whole multitude of things and scenarios. I know, I was negatively forecasting my procedures because of what I'd been through before, and that was already impacting their pain before I even got there. We do this all the time. The brain is a machine for prediction. That's what it does. It's always thinking about the possibilities. But if we are really, really, really stressed and our stress bucket's really, really full, it will negatively forecast rather than try to think of solutions to problems and how we can manage better. And it can also negatively introspect about the past as well. So it can negatively think about past experience, and it all creates anxiety in the now. And I think that procedure I had with the drains and everything is that perfect example of just how that impacted my experience in the now. Okay, thinking about those past drains, knowing I was going to have it again, absolutely impacted that experience that I went through. Okay, and it happens to us all the time. As I say, brains are prediction machines, constantly on that path of trying to work out how and where it can do things better and manage better depending on our bucket. But every negative thought we have is accumulated and stored. We say it's stored in a stress bucket. Okay, I talk about stress buckets a lot. And when our worlds get really unmanageable, we talk about being buckety. It's just a word that we tend to talk about, me and my clients, but people know what buckety means when the bucket's really full. So have a quick think about that meeting as an example, and how all the possibilities you perhaps predict. A doctor's appointment may go wrong. Doctor's appointment, will they listen to me? Will they tell me it's all in my head for the umpteenth time? Will they actually try and help me? Will they listen to me or kick me out the door? Your pain is a stressor. Pain goes directly into the stress bucket. Okay, and we have an average amount of thoughts between 12,000 and 60,000 thoughts a day. Just take that in for a second. It's incredible. 12,000 to 60,000 thoughts a day. And the more stress we have, the more negative they're going to be, and the more they're just going to keep adding to that stress bucket. Okay. And a lot of us may be not consciously aware of a lot of these thoughts as well. They are bumbling around there in the background. And some of you will be aware, but not a lot of people are aware of just how many thoughts are impacting them in the now. Okay, so everyone is different, and let's not forget that biopsychosocial model, or impacting the pain and its amplification. Many of these factors pay an effect, or have an effect on our stress bucket. Arguments with friends, yet another symptom coming out to play, something new that my body has decided to chuck at me today, all adds to our stress and our stress bucket. Okay, so most people will start the day with a little bit of stress in their stress bucket, and that's perfectly normal. A little bit of stress is not a bad thing. Stress gets talked about a lot as just stress being a bad thing. It's chronic stress is a bad thing. When you're in a lot of stress for extended periods of time, then it becomes very, very bad for us. But a little bit of stress is good. It's what motivates us to get up and get going in the morning. People like you and I living with pain conditions, we can start the day with more stress in our bucket than the average bear. Okay, and we have to consider we have less capacity in the bucket before it starts to overflow or become very, very full. So why we have to be so aware of our stress bucket more so than the average bear, is to maintain that stress bucket. Otherwise it just fills up so much quicker or overflows. We have a lot less capacity in our bucket purely by having the conditions that we have. It is not our fault. It is just the way the bucket is, the way the brain is, and the way the body is. Okay, it's not your fault that we're in this situation. We just have an awful lot going on. Okay, so we just have to be aware of all of these factors. Okay, but thankfully we do have a method for emptying our bucket, which is known as REM sleep or rapid eye movement. Sorry, I keep doing that with my slides. Okay, so we rerun the events of the day and we change them from being a very emotional memory to a narrative memory where we have control over those. Okay, and you'll be familiar with how REM works. Someone upsets you in the afternoon and you really are upset, and so you call a friend, family member, whoever, and you talk to somebody about it, and they might tell you to forget about it, and you really can't, and you're thinking about it and thinking about it when you go to bed. At night we rerun the events in that clear or metaphorical dreaming way, and we move it from that primitive lower end of the brain to the intellectual brain where we have that control over it. So we wake up in the morning, we might have forgotten about the wretched person, we might not, but we'll certainly be saying something like, why did I allow this person to upset me? Okay, and just to add into that, with the slides, the the bucket overfloweth section there. There are other things that we talk about with clients when we're doing our information gathering in a consultation as to some other things that I help with, or we help with as solution focused people as well, because we know when the bucket starts to get full or overflowing, IBS becomes a massive problem, OCD becomes a lot worse, pain gets exacerbated. You may then start to experience headaches, migraines as just a direct result of the stress bucket. And yes, I know there is a lot of chatter around IBS and stress buckets, or IBS as a whole. We do have intolerances, and I get that. I'm lactose intolerant. I know people who are celiac and all of these kinds of things. But when the bucket is full, IBS becomes a huge problem for us. It can do anyway if you're that way inclined. Slower gut motility becomes worse, more constipation, more bloating, all of those kinds of things, because the brain considers certain systems to be non-essential systems. So this is why it happens. So if you're having a very full bucket for a long period of time, the brain starts to shut down those non-essential systems, and that includes your digestive system. Okay. So it does not function particularly well, and it can become worse and worse and worse. And if you already struggle with slow gut motility, any sort of gastroparesis where the stomach motility actually slows down to perhaps stopping, anything like that can become exacerbated as well as a direct result of the bucket. But also things like your immune system is impacted as well. It starts to shuts down your immune system. Actually, what it does do is wear it out. So short term, your immune system gets boosted by stress. Long term, if your immune system's being boosted for too long, you wear it out. So you get sick a lot easier and quicker. And you're constantly catching colds. The symptoms that you do get of a cold become worse. Those kinds of things. I should put on here MCAS as well. Now, MCAS is not a direct result of a bucket. MCAS is there, much like your pain. It's not saying that your pain becomes pain all of a sudden because your bucket's full. But thinking about MCAS in itself and things like IBDs as well, all become worse or are triggered worse by stress and the stress bucket. And that's why stress management is so important for a lot of these conditions as well. So MCAS can improve not curry or anything like that. I'm not saying that at all, but we can reduce the intensity of MCAS reactions, and some people can tolerate some of the foods they couldn't tolerate before when they're managing their stress better as well. Okay, so there's a direct correlation there between MCAS reactions and stress, much like there is with pain and stress as well. Okay, so just to add that in there, perhaps I should add that to the slides, because I know a lot of us struggle with MCAS. And if you've not heard of MCAS, it's just mast cell activation syndrome. You can have a look into that. If you struggle with a lot of reactions to things, and it doesn't mean anaphylaxis necessarily, although that it can be a symptom, it's a lot of so all of a sudden I've become, I say allergic to nuts, but very nut intolerant. So it makes me very tight chested, having those kinds of hive reactions to things. I was allergic to my dog. I had to wash my hands every time I fussed her too much and take antihistamines every day because I was having those kinds of reactions to her. But she was worth it, you know, if we all do these things to ourselves all the time. Okay. So just to add that in there. Now, you know, a lot of people, you know, we think about our bucket being fairly empty when we wake up in the morning, because that's what sleep should do for us. And we start the day without a lot of anxiety, anger, and low mood. And a lot of us don't, you know, because we have so much going on, but also there are other factors. So I just want to, I think I've done it here, go on to, I've mentioned REM sleep. I just want to do a quick poll very, very quickly, if you do not mind, if you indulge me one more time. So if you've got your smartphone, you've got a QR code you can use your camera function for, or you could go onto a browser, type in slido.com, and the number is 1490055. Okay, there's a lot of factors to sleep, okay, and it'll just be interesting to know, in terms of your sleep, do you have any of those particular issues? Because, and I'll crack on because I'm aware of time as well, but if you wouldn't mind indulging me in the short term, that'd be great. Now, a lot of us pile way too much into our buckets, and again, I'm just reiterating, it isn't necessarily our fault. It is the world that we live in now. It's a completely different world to the way our brains were wired many moons ago. Sometimes our bucket is going to sadly overflow, and for one reason or another, REM sleep's actually restricted to about 25% of our sleep patterns. And if we try to overdo that, our mind will wake us up. And we know when our mind wakes us up, because we wake up wide awake, feel quite miserable, can often struggle to then fall back to sleep again. And we know the difference between that and a bang outside, for example. We feel completely different. And we can get into a bit of a grip of a vicious circle. The more you have in your stress bucket, the more time you will spend in that primitive negative part of the brain, and the more it encourages you to be negative. Okay. And the other actual thing, or the other thing we have as well, the other option for a lot of people is, again, piling too much into our buckets, but it also takes an enormous amount of effort to diffuse all of that that's in the bucket. Okay. So REM sleep, sadly, is really, really an energetic thing for our brain to do. It takes a huge amount of energy to do REM, to diffuse all of that stress and anxiety that we have. Okay, so sometimes we can overdo it, and it can exhaust us, which makes us even more lower in mood, and then we find ourselves in another vicious circle. And some people tend to can flick between both, actually. So in an attempt to empty our bucket, we are encouraged to then sleep more and more, sometimes all day, which actually then makes our mood lower and worse, and our anxiety worse and worse as well, as a direct result of that. Now, when we are doing REM, when we have our EEG machines on our heads, we can see the brain burns white hot with energy. Okay, and in those instances, burns pound for pound more oxygen than your beating heart. And I think that's incredible. Okay, so you can only imagine why we struggle with fatigue, and then we've got sleep taking even more energy and almost nicking it from the day to come. It's not surprised we're then struggling to wake up in the morning and get going as well. Okay, so reducing our stress, reducing anxiety, all plays a massive part in helping us manage better. Okay, thank you for joining me for that one. Right, next slide. Hopefully it's going to work. Oh, there's 3% that have no sleep issues at all. Good on you. Excellent news. Okay, so before I go on to questions, I might have just done all of this in time. What we get you to do, real simply, just to kind of kickstart the process, to help you reduce some of your anxiety, manage your stress a little bit better, is to get you to document just 1 or 2 really small things that have been good each day, even if it's a nice cup of tea. That's all we're asking, okay? And this is different to gratitude. If you do gratitude, great. I love gratitude. I actually created my own little sheet that I do my what's been good and gratitude, because I love it as well. But what you do find if you do gratitude is you tend to write the same things day in, day out, and that's not a bad thing. But when we ask what's been good, it asks the brain a different question, and we come up with a lot more different answers as well, because looking for the good stuff can be really difficult when our bucket's very full. I really struggled with this when I was first giving it a go, because my brain and I was in so much pain. I really struggled to see around that tunnel vision of just stress buckets, polar bears and everything. So writing down what's been good and documenting those just helps you punch through all of that and gets your brain to start rewiring towards the good stuff. And it makes you work from that upper brain as well, that logical, happier part of the brain. Helps with the rewiring process. We get lots of lovely neurotransmitters that help us feel good. You know, we don't need to be Olympic athletes to feel good. Getting the right mix of neurotransmitters and hormones and chemicals to be released can help us feel amazing. Also, if you do it just before you go to bed, you could get a whole bunch of serotonin, which helps you manage your sleep better as well, helps you get a better quality night's sleep. And one of the other things we ask you to do is to listen to a nighttime recording each night when going to sleep, which all kickstarts the process, and that's all part of the clinical hypnotherapy side of what I do. And the reason why we get you to listen to that is to all help with good sleep hygiene. So if you've ever spoken to an OT and they've talked about sleep management, sleep hygiene, it's just doing the same things every night going to sleep. So if you do your what's been good and you do your medications, you take a shower, you get yourself comfortable in bed, you pop your nighttime recording in, and you drift off to sleep. The more you do the same thing every night going to sleep, going to bed at the same time, waking up at the same time, the more you train your brain. When I do this set of things, it is now sleepy time. Okay, and I'm not one of those people that will tell you to not watch telly. You know, some people love it. I love having something on to fall asleep to. If I don't need my nighttime recording because sleep's going well and pain's okay-ish at the moment, you know, I might fall asleep to a podcast or something, or watch something. But what I do have are the blue light filters on everything. Okay, so I actually use a tablet to watch because I know I can put the blue light filters on rather than a TV. But that's just my preference. Blue light will stimulate your brain awake, and stop you from sleeping potentially very well at all. But any blue light filters, you'll notice if you've ever tried it, if you're laying there at night and you're looking at your phone, it feels like your eyes being pinned open, and then you put a blue light filter on, it's like, okay, oh, that's better. Yeah, there is a real difference with those blue light filters on, so they can be really useful if you want to fall asleep to something like that. Blue light filters are the way forward. They are great. So doing your what's been good. The nighttime recording you can have access to, so there's a QR code there. And if you remind me, if you'd like a link instead, I've got a Google Drive link you can have. I will make sure I give that to Nikki. If I don't remember to put it in the chat box for you all, you can have access to that and my slides, things as well from today. I'll give you a link for that as well. So that's all part of that clinical hypnotherapy side of what I do. But what it does do, it helps you get into a sleep-like state. Okay, so it's not too dissimilar from sleep, but the sleep-like state is it's almost like light sleep. So then you fall into your 90-minute cycle much more efficiently with it than without it as well. And everything in that recording is done with metaphors and stories, because brains do not like advice. Okay, they do not like to be told what to do. So we want to make sure that the brain's happy with what it's listening to. And it's got little things like this in there for confidence building and lots of nice things as well. If you struggle with visualization, I understand your frustration. Visualization, relaxation are all skills to practice and do. So the more you practice and try them, the better that you do get at them. But if you do struggle with anything like that, laying down and doing, you can listen to them whilst you're colouring or doing anything that gives you a focused state of attention. Just do not listen to any of the relaxations whilst operating any sort of heavy machinery or driving. Okay. Okay, I will end that there if that's okay, and then we've got some time for questions. I've got other things there, but we'll stop that there if that's okay, because we're running out of time. So I hope that's okay, Nikki.
Hi, Kim. That was really, really, really useful and interesting. Thank you so much. I was very quickly trying to do that link, to put the link into the chat for the relaxation. I don't know whether you're able to quickly pop that in the chat, because I didn't quite have time to do that one.
No worries.
Oh, I think somebody's done that, have they?
Oh, bless them. How very sweet.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that, Olivia. That was really helpful. So obviously, I'm conscious of time. We did lose a few people. So much information, but
yeah,
again,
sorry.
really, no,
and
really,
there's more.
really, really good. So thank you. I'm just going to ask a couple of questions because I am cognizant of time. You were talking about blue light filters. Lots of questions about. Is that something you have to buy? Is it in the device? How do you do that?
Yeah, so a lot of devices will come with eye comfort shields. So if you've got an Android, for example, you do the pull down screen, there's like an eye comfort. Sometimes they're called nighttime filters. I actually find that they aren't enough, and then I download another app on top, which is completely free, to make it even darker and more lighter, more blue lighted filters. I think it's called Twilight. I have the nighttime or blue light filters on my laptop device, so I've got one on now, otherwise I'd be stimulated awake and then I'd never fall asleep tonight after having all of this excitement this evening. So I do all of that on these devices as well. Most smart devices now will have some sort of blue light filter or nighttime filter, it's called, on those devices. But there is also a free one called Twilight that's quite useful. You can change the intensity, the color of the filter, and also how dark or bright your screen is. So hopefully that's useful. Hopefully that's answered your question.
Lovely, thank you. Adrenaline. People are talking a lot about adrenaline, getting them through activities, doing something, etc. And then once the adrenaline's worn off, the pain hits with a great big bang. Is that a usual thing?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we'll use a lot of adrenaline to push through, and this is why it's important to think about pacing, but also, we're not thinking about pacing as you do a thing and rest, because that's how I was taught pacing, because then you've never got time for anything, have you? You do a thing, you then just stop and do nothing. Well, life goes on. So pacing's all and Joe talks about this a lot. It's all about how we can swap our tasks, check in with ourselves and things like that. But yeah, you think about pushing through, adrenaline will absolutely increase that pain experience, but a lot of the time it's because the foot is on the pedal and all of a sudden you take it off, and because you're distracted with everything you're doing and pushing through with, then you take the foot off the pedal. Yes, it's going to hit you more. So whilst you're doing all of those things, if there's any sort of time, just a second where you can quickly scan and see how you're feeling, just do a few breathing exercises, anything to try and calm things down as much as you can. And there is information on breathing exercises and all sorts of things that we have. But the main one is any sort of breathing where your in breath is shorter than your out breath. That will send the strongest signal to your brain to activate your parasympathetic nervous system, so your rest digest nervous system. So to calm everything down, calm the pain signals down, and potentially reduce adrenaline as well, and things as well, so you feel less at the end of the day. But if you're having to push through, that's where the A+ fibers come in to try and help put a lid on that a little bit at least, so you don't feel so burnt out and kind of pain exacerbation at the end of the day. Okay, so hopefully that's useful.
Thank you, Kim. I'm going to leave it there. I'm just really conscious of time, and it's very late. And I know that you've been talking now for nearly 2 hours, which again, is not an easy task,
Okay.
especially when it's evening time. So I just want to sort of say thank you from everybody. There's been some amazing conversations going on in the chat between all of the people here. So I know they've all got a lot out of it. Lots of people talking about such interesting information. So thank you so much for joining us again. And if you can get the slides to me and people want them, you can just email me, and I will get those out to everybody.
No worries, I will. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kim, and have a good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.